Howdy, High Tides. I'm Jed Hoff from the Beach Film News. This Thursday is April 22nd, meaning it's Earth Day. Some things you can do to help the environment is recycle, pick up trash you see on the floor, or generally be a good citizen to the earth. Now, on to my brother with his piece about the film festival.
Whoa! I just teleported in because it's time for part 2 of my little mini film school. That's the name of it, My Little Mini Film School. So, last week I talked to you a little bit about how to come up with an idea and write a script. Which means that this week, I'm talking to you about the second step, casting and filming. Now, casting isn't that hard. I mean, if you want to go above and beyond, it's pretty easy to call up, let's say, the drama teacher and ask for a casting call. But otherwise, just cast your friends. The important thing is that they don't have to be good actors, they just have to believe that they're good actors. Because real good acting comes from within. But I'll get to that later. The next thing is locations. Now for locations, again, you can go somewhere if you're the kind who has a car, like me. Or if you want, you can just film something in your house. I don't know, you can take your living room and dress it up and say it's a bar. It's a great thing about movies, is we're only looking at what the camera wants us to see. The third step, once you've got your location down, is actually filming. If you have a camera, go ahead and use it. I'm personally using a Canon mirrorless camera. But otherwise, you can just use your stinking phone. It's right here, it's got a camera, it's got a microphone. You can hold it, you can put it on a tripod, you can put it on a table. It's the easiest thing in the world. Just press the record button. If you really want to push your phone to its limits, there's a fantastic app called Filmic Pro that lets you use your phone's camera way more than the default camera app. But again, nothing wrong with just using the default camera app either. There have been great feature films that have been shot entirely on an iPhone. So, you have your camera, you have your cast, you have your location, now it's time to film. Important thing to know when filming is where the camera is going to be when people are saying their lines. It can be pretty easy to just hold up the camera and point it at whoever's talking. But if you keep doing long takes, it can be visually boring. That's why it's important to spice things up with a cut. A cut is when you switch the camera. You move it somewhere else, in case you didn't know that. Anyway. Once you've gotten that cut down, the next thing you gotta do, once you're done with that, is make sure continuity's good. And then once continuity's good, you have to make sure the color balance is correct. And once the color balance is correct, you gotta make sure you have default good lighting situations. And if you got lighting, then you gotta make sure the white balance is correct. And of course, if the white balance is correct, then you have to adjust for exposure. And then once you get exposure, you have to get color grading. Once you get color grading in addition to color balance and white balance, then you have to get props and makeup and all of that, but you don't have to do any of that because we're in high school. Just do it. Make your film, shoot your shot, guys. That's all I gotta say for today. Now I'm gonna warp away to a new time zone.
Thanks, Isaac. This film festival will sure go down in history. But what about this week in history?
Good morning, High Tides. Let's get back to this week in history. To start this week's segment, on April 19th, 1897, the world's oldest annual marathon run in Boston, Massachusetts, United States, races for the first time. The Boston Marathon ranks as one of the world's most prestigious road racing events with an average of 20,000 people taking part. The marathon is one of 5 members of the World Marathon Majors, which includes the cities of Boston, London, Berlin, Chicago, and New York City. To follow that, on April 19th, 1987, the Simpsons series, created by cartoonist Matt Groening, began in 1987 as a cartoon short on The Tracy Ullman Show, a variety program of the Fox Broadcasting Company. Expanded to half an hour, it then began airing regularly in January of 1990. And before that, on April 21st, 1926, Queen Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was born. Queen regnant of 16 independent states known as the Commonwealth Realms with a combined population, including dependencies of over 129 million, Elizabeth became queen following her father's death on February 6, 1952. She had married Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, in 1947 before becoming the queen, and they had 4 children. And to conclude this week's segment, on April 22nd, 1950, one of my favorite rock artists, Peter Frampton, was born. English musician, singer, producer, and multi-instrumentalist, he started in the bands The Herd and The Humble Pie, but decided to go on as solo artist with his debut album in 1972, Wind of Change. He did not become a big, massive commercial success until his album Frampton Comes Alive was released in 1976 and hit top 10 around the world, including number 1 in the USA.
Well, High Tides, that's it for this week in history. Make sure to check in for the next one, and I will see you later.
There's another thing happening this week, and that's Earth Day. Here is a piece about Earth Day.
Earth Day marks the anniversary of the birth of the modern environmental movement in 1970. Earth Day gave a loud voice to the public environmentalists without one. Air pollution was commonly accepted as a smell of prosperity. Until this point, mainstream America remained largely oblivious to the environmental concerns and how a polluted environment threatens human health. Earth Day 1970 would come to provide a voice to this emerging environmental consciousness and putting environmental concerns to the front page of the world for this time. Senator Gaylord Nelson, a junior senator from Wisconsin, had always been one that's concerned for the environment. In January 1969, he witnessed the ravages of a massive oil spill in Santa Barbara, California. Inspired by the student anti-war movement, Senator Nelson wanted to move the energy of the student anti-war, air, and water protests about pollution to the younger generation. He did just that, and Senator Nelson announced the idea for a teach-in on college campuses to the national media, and persuaded Pete McCloskey, a Republican congressman, to serve as his co-chair. They recruited Dennis Hayes, a young activist, to organize the campus teach-ins. Earth Day inspired 20 million Americans to take the streets, parks, and auditoriums to demonstrate the impacts of 150 years of industrial development, which had left serious human health impacts. Thousands of colleges and universities organized protests against the deterioration of the environment. By the end of 1970, First Earth Day led to the creation of the United States Environmental Protection Agency and other first-of-their-kind environmental laws for our country. For example, the Clean Water Act. It establishes the basic structure for regulating discharges of pollutants into the waters of the United States and regulating quality standards for surface waters. There's also other acts like the Clean Air Act, where all potential sources of air pollution must comply with provisions of the law and act, and all emissions must be within the air quality standards like cars, trucks, and buses. These laws have protected millions of men and women and children from disease and death, and have protected hundreds of species from extinction, all thanks to the creation of Earth Day.
Maybe you want to have some food on Earth Day. What about an Earth Day quiche brought to you by the Beach High Culinary Team?
I'm going to start by poking holes in the crust so then when we put it in the oven it will flare out and the air will
It'll release the steam.
Release all
keep
the
the
steam.
bubbles from the crust. What did we set our oven on?
350.
350 degrees. And we're going to pre-cook that for about 8 minutes. We'll let it cool.
And now I'm going to take a shallot and I'm going to slice it so we can saute it in the pan in just a few minutes. We're going to start by cutting off the edges and then move to cut it in half and start slicing it up. Okay, now I'm going to go in and put a little bit of olive oil onto the pan and turn it on to medium heat and start to saute the shallots. So we're going to go in a couple handfuls at a time.
How long do we cook this?
Just till it's softened, so about a couple minutes. So you just want to keep on moving around the shallots and spinach because you don't want it to be cooked too much in one spot and you want it to be evenly softened. A half cup of heavy cream. Also, really quick, you can just tell the spinach has gone down a lot, and we are left with about now half a cup of spinach. now the crust is done. Well, for now. And we're gonna add the spinach and the shallots first. Make sure it's evenly distributed all over, because if not, it's going to be in one chunk. And that's what will create that bubbly egg quiche look. And we're going to do, this is after.
Well, it's almost the end of the episode, which means time for Second Opinion. Last week, we asked you, the viewer, do you think they should ban pit bulls? The answer, no. Only one person voted yes. This week's question has to do with Earth Day. It's animals or plants. Either scan that QR code or click the link in the description to answer that question. Well, with Beat Film News, I've been Jed Hoffman. Leaving you. Goodbye.